Now it's time to head back to Shannonville Motorsport Park, this time to sample BMW's middleweight liquid-cooled sporting twin, the F800S. As you saw from earlier in the program, we were recently invited to Shannonville, along with some of Canada's top motorcycle journalists, to sample BMW's all-new HP2 Sport. While we were there, parked amongst all the big guns, we spied a lone F800S prepped for the racetrack. Now, as you know from watching previous episodes of the experience, this machine isn't a big displacement air-cooled opposed twin like the HP2, but rather an 800cc liquid-cooled, fuel-injected parallel twin with belt final drive. It's primarily designed for sporty commutes, weekend getaways, or casual sport riding on your favorite set of twisties. However, on this day at the racetrack, we were pleased to discover that not only does the F800S make a great street ride, but with very little effort and very little cash, it can also be turned into a great little track bike.
This is the F800S. It's an 800cc liquid-cooled twin. It's a vertical twin, unlike the parallel twins that we raced with our boxer engines. And new this year for 2008, we split the Canadian Thunder Racing Series, and we have a secondary class within Thunder called Canadian Sport Twins. And it was open to liquid-cooled motorcycles that did not produce more than 90 horsepower and air-cooled motorcycles that produced up to 95 horsepower. So the BMW F800S falls into this new category. We've actually borrowed this motorcycle from a gentleman named Shane Poon, who races this in the CST class. He's an amateur, you know, hence the red numbers. First-year rider. And he was able to basically take this stock motorcycle, put on some race tires, do a couple of updates to the suspension, and just go out and ride. He was able to learn all the new tracks. He hadn't been out before, and compete with some of the motorcycles that were front-running motorcycles in Canadian Thunder in years past. You know, but now with this new lighter motorcycle, you put on a slip-on pipe and you know, remove some of the street components and hit the racetrack.
And standing by on this day to hit the track for our cameras was the technical editor for Inside Motorcycles, Mr. John Sherrard.
I was surprised how quickly I went on the bike. The balance of the bike is good, it's very forgiving, it turns like a razor blade, and the torque delivery is so flat on the bike that it doesn't surprise. So it would be a fantastic bike for a beginner, an intermediate, or an expert would be able to go really quickly on it. The power delivery, it's so linear. The biggest problem is you don't notice it approaching the rev limiter. A lot of bikes will approach the rev limiter and then the power will fall off just before it hits it, so the rider gets a feeling of anticipation when to shift. Where here, the delivery is so flat that it'll just pile into the rev limiter if you're not watching the tag. So perhaps a shift light would be a great $40 adder to that package. Brakes are fantastic. They're strong on the bike. The suspension is the weakness of the bike. Right now, and rightly so, they deliver that bike at a price point where they're not putting $2,000 worth of suspension on it from the factory to keep the price down. So a little bit of fork work and a good shock, that thing could easily win races, easily. You wouldn't need to break the bank preparing that thing for competition. You know, a weekend of lock wiring, fitment of a shock, and a little bit of fork work. You know, with a week of evening preparations, that thing could be a title contender, which can't be said for most of the competitors in that class. When it comes to the belt drive on the bike, it seems to offer a little bit more cushion in the drivetrain. You notice it when you pick the throttle up and hit the throttle hard. It doesn't upset the bike. It doesn't roar. It kind of just whoa and drives off of the corners, very flat. So the belt fitment is great. It does limit your secondary drive ratio choices because you're not ordering pulleys out of your dealer for that thing. But as I mentioned before, the torque is so flat on that thing, your gearing is not a concern. You can be up or down a gear as long as you shift before a red line. It loves it. The beauty of the motor and the drivetrain makes it super easy to ride really fast. and the suspension, to reiterate, with some work. Again, they provided it at a low cost, and on the street, the compliancy would be beautiful. But on the racetrack, at speeds with good OEM race rubber, it needs some more support from the chassis. But yeah, all in all, a fantastic motorcycle.